Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in. If you're new here, consider subscribing. It really helps keep these stories coming. And while you're here, let me know in the comments where you're listening from. Now sit back, relax, and let's get into the story. I didn't notice the first sign of the outbreak in a city or on a news crawl. I noticed it in the way the campground went quiet. We were at Palo Duro Canyon State Park in the Texas Panhandle, a place we loved for the red walls and the way dusk turned the rock into a slow ember. Our motorhome sat in a pull-through site near the end of the loop, nose pointed toward the canyon's mouth, like we could drive straight into the sky if we wanted to. We had our routine down, awning out just far enough for shade, chocks under the wheels, a line strung to air-dry towels, folding chairs set to watch the light slide west. The wind smelled like juniper and dust. A roadrunner patrolled the picnic pads like a tiny security guard with a long tail. Then a family in a rental Class C left in a hurry, leaving their grey water hose behind as if it weighed 100 pounds. The site host knocked on their door 2 hours earlier and no one answered. We hardly paid attention at first. People forget cables, hoses, levelling blocks all the time. But then the couple in the airstream next to us didn't come back from a morning hike. Park rangers went looking. One came back driving fast and quiet, that strange combination that says, "Don't ask me anything yet." We heard one short burst on the ranger's handheld radio, and then nothing. By afternoon, our weather alert radio began to stutter. It tried for words, failed, and fell into a regular tone that never resolved into any message we recognized. The park Wi-Fi we never used anyway went dark. Cell bars dropped from 3 to 1 to the empty triangle that means the line is cut somewhere you will never see. Then, as the sun leveled itself with the canyon rim, we heard it. The soft, metallic cough of generators shutting down one after another across the loop. People stepped outside and stood in 2s and 3s, the way you do at the edge of a storm, and looked at each other as if recognition might help. My wife, Erin, had been a critical care nurse for 15 years before we gave ourselves to the road. She had a voice that could flatten panic without raising its volume. She stood at our dinette, laid a hand on the weather radio, and said, "Whatever this is, we prepare the way we always said we would. Quiet power, lights off after dark, and we don't leave the park tonight." "Yes, Mum," I said. I used the same voice I used to say, "I love you" in crowded rooms, where that kind of talk made people nervous. I hit the switch that disconnected the converter and let us run entirely from the house batteries. Our battery monitor dropped to 91%. The solar panels would have to top us off in the morning. I stepped outside and took the generator key from its hook, just to remove the temptation. The onan was reliable, but the sound carried down the canyon like a silver lure in a river full of hungry shadows. We walked the loop together, not to gawk, but because the difference between rumor and reality is measured in footsteps. The site host gave us a look that read grateful and scared at the same time. A man in a bright new park t-shirt, someone's first day, moved picnic tables closer to fire rings like furniture could make a difference. A team with a fishing pole stood on the roof of a fifth wheel and filmed the empty canyon with his phone as if he could capture service along with the view. "Do we say anything?" I asked. "Not yet," Erin said. "We don't have facts. We have a tone on the radio and a lot of missing messages. People panic on guesses." We finished the loop at our site. I deployed the privacy shades, the ones that looked like silver eyes from the outside and blocked light in both directions. Inside, I checked our water. Fresh tank at 68%, grey at 42, black at 29. Diesel was at 3/4, thanks to a fill-up in Amarillo. I kept the habit of logging everything in a small green notebook, the kind with a grid on one side and dots on the other. I wrote, "Day 0, systems nominal, hold steady." We ate quietly, our forks making that polite tap you hear when people pretend not to be listening for something else. After dark, we stayed dim. Our headlamps had red filters. We set them to the lowest level. We always practice that. Enjoy the night without telling it we're here. When the first infected reached the campground, they didn't come like a movie. They came like anyone who needed help. The woman was barefoot. The canyon floor can turn your feet into a map of pain. But she moved with a steadiness that didn't match the situation. She walked straight down the middle of the loop, as if she had practiced it in daylight. Someone called out, and she turned her head halfway toward the voice, and then back. Like the motion wasn't entirely hers. The site host took one step toward her, and then stopped because the rangers had told him to stop. I'm sure of it. The woman reached the airstream, and pressed both hands flat to the aluminum. Listening maybe, or checking for warmth. Inside, a dog barked twice, and then went silent, like someone had put a hand gently over its muzzle. I know what fear can do to a dog. I also know the sound of a person holding a dog's collar and whispering "good boy" into fur. Erin, beside me, didn't breathe for 3 beats. Then she whispered, "That walk, that head turn, neurology. You've seen this?" Her eyes stayed on the woman. "I've seen brains lose the handshake with the body. Not like this. But I've seen something close. Do we stay behind the line. We protect ourselves. We don't add to the mess by trying to fix what we don't understand." The woman passed us without noticing we were people and not wind. She continued toward the canyon mouth, step after careful step, until the dark folded her away. We didn't sleep much. I kept my hand on the cabinet where we stored our defensive tools, like I could anchor them into being helpful that way. I had a handheld light at the ready, the kind with a focus beam and a low output mode that didn't scream, "Here we are." I had a small radio clipped to my shirt so I could hear anything moving through the air. We used to fall asleep to the sound of faraway ocean waves when we parked near the coast. That night, our waves were the tiny clicks of circuits adjusting to temperature. Every sound looked for a name. Before dawn, a park truck rolled by with its lights off. I caught a silhouette in the passenger seat, a ranger leaning forward, as if his eyes worked better if the rest of him tried. I wanted to step outside and ask, to offer help, to share coffee. The way his shoulders were set told me that words would be a burden heavier than his radio. By sunrise, the term had found us, epidemic. It came over the weather radio in a clear voice you could use to measure a doorway. "This is a public safety message. Please shelter in place. Do not approach symptomatic individuals. Avoid travel to urban centers. Do not congregate in large groups. If you are in a recreational area, return to your primary residence if safe to do so. Additional guidance will follow." Then the tone resumed, like a heartbeat you can't unhear. We looked at each other, and the conversation we'd had on and off for years settled into its permanent shape. "We are at our residence," I said. "We always said the road was our home," Erin replied. "Now the road is everyone's escape route." We took stock. We had food enough for a month if we were careful, and if I learned to like beans straight from the can again. Our water filters were in good shape. A gravity system for the RV's faucet, and a compact squeeze filter for hikes. We had a spare pump for the fresh water system, spare fuses, a tyre repair kit, and the tools to use them. Our first aid crate was organised with the patience of someone who had worked nights and knew what it was to find the right thing in the wrong light. Our motorhome was a 2006 diesel pusher, a Winnebago with a Cummins ISC 8.3 litre and an Allison transmission that shifted like it believed in a future. We had 600 watts of solar on the roof, feeding 2 lithium batteries through an MPPT controller. A system I'd wired and rewired until it fit us exactly. We had a small GMRS radio mounted at the dash for local chatter and a handheld ham radio for longer reach. My call sign was a small badge of a previous life, a civil engineer who liked bridges and radio towers in equal measure. We planned on paper and then we planned in motion. The first rule, quiet. The second, clean power. The third, move only when control was on our side. We made a new rule on the spot. Never park in a place we couldn't exit pulling forward. The park office posted a printed notice by lunch. The park will close at sunset. Please vacate the campground before 19 o'clock. Avoid congested areas. Travel safely. The paper flapped a little, a small sound that meant the wind still followed rules. We left before the convoy formed. Erin strapped in at the passenger seat, with the headset we used on long days to talk without raising our voices. She took the paper map and a pencil and circled everything that looked like small. We knew what major highways would be. Stationary parking lots full of people whose last full tank was a week ago. We would take state roads, farm-to-market roads, and when necessary, gravel. The diesel was topped off, and I had 2 5-gallon jerry cans strapped into the rear rack. Extra weight I'd always grumbled about. Now they felt like savings accounts you forget you opened. We took TX 217 out of the park and then north to US 87, avoiding Amarillo proper by threading a path like a seam ripper, Hereford, then a jog toward Dalhart, where the wind farms turned slow like readers turning pages. We kept the speed steady, engine temp low and eyes everywhere. Our headsets carried small words back and forth. Left, clear, hold. We passed a roadblock made of pickup trucks with the doors open and no one inside. Erin pointed to an irrigation ditch on the right, with enough room to wedge us if anything went wrong. Exit there if the road becomes a cork, she said. I nodded, rolled my left shoulder once to keep it honest, and kept our nose pointed toward the wide sky of New Mexico. By evening, we were at Capulin, where a cinder cone rises up like a memory of heat. The visitor center was empty. The little museum inside looked like it had been closed for a week, posters neatly aligned, no sign of hurry. We drove past and found a gravel turnout with good visibility for a long distance in both directions. We parked on the far edge, gave ourselves a triangle of escape routes, and went dark. The night was clean and thin, and the stars were like glass beads. We didn't light a fire. We ate cold, tortillas with canned chicken, a handful of almonds, a square of chocolate each, because morale is fuel too. I did the dishes with 2 cups of water and a guilt that has always followed me around when I let good water run down a drain. We set watches without saying the word watch because we weren't soldiers, but we were careful. I took the first half of the night at the windshield, watching silhouettes pivot against the horizon. Erin took the second, with a blanket around her shoulders and a notebook open to write things down. I read her notes later. Heard one vehicle around 3 o'clock. Small truck, slow, no lights. Coyotes at 3:45. One call, then stop. No movement near the road. Wind rose and fell like breath. Morning brought us the next rule. People are a bigger variable than the infected. We met our first roadblock 4 miles outside Raton. A line of 3 cars at a diagonal across the lane. Hoods open in a way that asked for help and demanded it at the same time. 2 men stood in the shade of a billboard and watched us approach. Neither raised a hand to flag us down. That alone kept the hair along my arms from standing up. Erin put her palm lightly on my knee, the sign for slow to idle and don't commit yet. We rolled to a stop with 50 yards to spare and let the engine idle low enough to whisper. A woman stepped out from behind the billboard then, hands open, palms visible. She walked like someone who could run, but chose not to because she wanted us to see the choice. "Morning," she said, the word floating down the road like a paper boat. "Morning," Erin replied through the half-open side window. We never slid windows open all the way unless we meant to shake hands. "You folks okay?" "We could use a tow," the woman said, nodding at the lead car. "Battery's dead. We've got a kid in the back seat who needs shade, and we can't move into the ditch." "Got cables?" Erin asked. "Got cables, no juice. We've got a jump pack," I said very softly. Erin didn't look at me. She kept her eyes on the woman. "Does your friend behind the billboard want to join the conversation?" To their credit, the 2 men did step out. They left their hands at their sides, thumbs out, the universal sign of see nothing here. Erin said, "Okay, we can help, but we do it our way. You keep distance. You 2 step behind the front bumper of your car. And you," she nodded at the woman, "stand at the hood and tell me when it's seated. She tipped her chin toward me. does the connectors. We set up the jump pack like a tiny ceremony, red to positive, black to the engine ground, and we didn't lean in too far. My eyes kept sliding off the engine bay toward the billboard because I didn't want to watch the hands near the bumper more than I watched the place where no one was supposed to be. The lead car's dome light flickered to life as the pack's gauge dipped a little, then steadied. The woman looked at me through the windshield and lifted her fingers in a small thank you. Her eyes had the exact color of high prairie sky in the afternoon, blue that wanted to be too bright and fell back into itself. When the engine caught, she closed the hood carefully, like quiet could live under it. "We appreciate it," she said. "We're headed east, family and Guyman." "We're northbound," Erin said. "Avoid big highways. They don't move." The woman's mouth twitched in a shape that wanted to be a smile and became a grimace instead. She looked like she could have been a teacher the week before, one who carried a tote bag full of graded papers and a spare sweater for the classroom. "No one moves the same direction very long. Safe travel." "Safe travel," Erin said. We dismantled our small ceremony, reversed, and took a side road I barely noticed on the map 2 minutes earlier. People watched us go. I thought of the dog in the Airstream and hoped he was still hearing "Good boy" whispered into his fur. By the time we crossed into Colorado, the pattern had solidified. Rural communities posted homemade signs at their edges. No fuel, no services, keep driving. Some were friendly, please don't stop. Some were plain, town closed. A few were an argument you could read without hearing voices. No entry slashed through and replaced with help here and then slashed again. We obeyed the first message we saw and saved ourselves from sorting out who had the chalk. We kept moving north with aspen groves flickering like coin against the road's edge. We took CO10 to La Junta, skirted around the town, then bent northeast toward the empty space on the map that meant less trouble. We stopped only to siphon. That first siphon taught us more than we wanted to know. We found a farm supply lot with a row of trucks that had not moved for a week. Sun bled the paint into a color that made me think of strawberry popsicles. Erin watched the road. I got out our hand pump with its clear tube and brass priming end that rattled when you shook it. I wore gloves because diesel is a perfume that keeps company too long. I slid the tube into the tank of the first truck, listened for the hollow sound I wanted, and pumped until the line went dark, and then liquid like a vein. I filtered the first gallon through a funnel with a built-in screen and a layer of paper filter we replaced after every vehicle. The fuel was clean enough to look like a promise. I wrote down the quantity in the green notebook and added biocide treatment added because microbes love diesel as much as engines do. I poured in the amount the ratio chart suggested, and then a hair more because charts don't know about trucks that sit in sun and wind. Erin's voice in my headset stayed calm and very close. "One vehicle heading our way," she said. "Slow. Could be curious. Could be looking for the same thing." "Call it if you need me," I said. A man in a straw hat pulled to the shoulder, left his window up, and watched us through polarized lenses that returned the world as a dark lake. After 30 seconds of stillness that I wanted to be minutes, he moved on without waving. Erin let out a breath as if someone had told a good joke we didn't need to laugh at. "We keep this short," she said. We did. We moved like choreographed sleepwalkers. Pump, filter, treat, pour, cap, mark. We filled both jerry cans and added 40 gallons to the tank. After, I wiped every drip, coiled every hose, and checked that our fill cap clicked closed. I didn't want to leave a trail on the road like a snail announcing dinner was this way. By the time we reached a small town with the same name as another small town somewhere else, we had our fuel is gold routine down to minutes. We stopped in places where vehicles gathered like geese. Park and ride lots. Behind the library, along the fence at a closed county fairground. We didn't touch private property that wasn't a vehicle. If anyone was around, we asked. If a note sat under a wiper blade that said this is ours in any form, we moved on. We made ourselves rules, and we followed them because it kept us human inside the moving shell. We learned quickly that noise drew the infected like porch lights draw moths. A highway crew's portable generator rattled away in a workyard one morning, and two figures walked into the chain link like they could push through by remembering how. They pressed their foreheads to the diamonds and turned their faces toward the sound without seeing it. One wore a reflective vest, the color and tape pattern familiar enough to make my stomach pull tight. The generator stuttered, then steadied. The figures kept their hands flat to the fence, patient as rain. We watched from the far side of the lot, through the gap between stacked barriers and a loader, our own engine off, our breath slow on purpose. After 10 minutes, the generator coughed itself to quiet. The figures shifted, listened to the new shape of the air, and then resumed a slow walk down the fence line in search of something that made sense. We waited until the wind had time to forget our smell. Then we left like a thought you choose not to finish. Nights. We favoured places that had fences you could see through. DOT yards with chain link. Way stations where the gates were open and the booths were empty. The far corners of church lots with a good view of the road. Our favourite was a pullout near a decommissioned fire tower on a low ridge in Nebraska. The tower's steps had been removed halfway up to discourage climbers, but the view still worked right from the ground. A full 270 degrees of horizon, plus the right kind of impediments, the kind you could move with a tow strap when morning came. We parked in the shallow bowl of the pullout, with the nose aimed at the exit, a thing I trained myself to do, even when the terrain made other orientations easier. You don't back a motorhome into uncertainty and call it safety. Erin and I divided tasks, not because we had to, but because it kept us fast. She was reconnaissance and medical. She walked with a camera and a small pair of binoculars, and a way of noticing that made me think of swallows over a lake, sudden, exact, beautiful in its certainty. She cleaned wounds if we made them. She kept a journal of symptoms we saw and the intervals between them. She never used harsh words for the infected. She used clinical terms that stripped fear to the bone and left only facts. I handled the vehicle, the map, the power system, the radios, and the small mechanical rituals that keep you moving, tightening hose clamps, cleaning air filters, checking belts before they become stories. Meeting other people was the part you couldn't practice. You set your policies, and then you bent them as needed and called the bending wisdom. We traded with a small group on the outskirts of a town that had an irrigation store, a farm supply, and a feed store that smelled like patience. They wanted medical supplies they could use, sterile gauze, antiseptic, tincture of iodine, and offered us a box of .223 cartridges and a spare water pump in the original packaging. We didn't trade if the numbers didn't add up. That day, we traded because their leader had eyes that knew how to look at maps, and because a girl of 12 stood behind him with a cat tucked into her jacket like a heartbeat. We told them where we had seen clean diesel. They told us about a road south that they said looked clear but wasn't. They asked us if we needed people. We told them the truth. We were built for two and had learned not to be more than our chassis could carry. Their leader nodded like we had passed a test he gave himself. We left each other with a short wave and the understanding that knowledge is its own currency, and you spend it carefully if you want to still have some later. The first time a human tried to take our home from us, it wasn't dramatic, it was opportunistic. We had stopped at a way station on US 83 where someone had left a note in the office that read, "Back in 10 a month earlier." The plaza had become a minor bazaar. 3 vehicles with their trunks open, a card table with canned goods displayed, like someone remembered price tags. We eased in at the far end, away from the cluster. Erin went to look over the card table, not to buy, but to see what kind of economy existed. I stayed with the RV, doing my usual dance of check the tyres, look at the fluid catch pan, listen for a new noise. A man in a work shirt with a name patch approached and said, "That's a nice rig. You got room for a family?" "Depends on the family," I said. 2 kids, my sister, me. He smiled like the math added up different for him than for me. "I'm sorry," I said. "We're not taking passengers. Not even for payment. We're not a bus." "You'll be a bus if I say you are," he he said, and then he waited for me to do something dumb. I didn't. I kept my hands visible, one on the edge of a compartment door, the other resting lightly on the open bay. I glanced toward Erin without moving my head. She'd seen the set of the man's shoulders and was coming back, not quickly, not slowly, just with purpose, and a small bag of pinto beans in her hand, as if buying them had always been the plan. The man glanced over my shoulder at the entry door. His eyes counted our locks like he was doing math under his breath. "This is our home," I said. "We've lived on the road our whole lives. We know how to keep it. I know how to take things," he said. He didn't say it like a threat, he said it like a weather report. "I believe you," I said. "I also believe you know the difference between a sure thing and a long bad afternoon." Erin arrived then and set the beans on the top step, which was her way of saying, "We are not leaving yet, but could if we had to." She looked at the man and smiled the way you smile when you meet an acquaintance from an old job in a different city and can't remember his name. "There's food and water at the church 2 miles north," she said in that calm voice that makes people hand her their hands. "They've set up a radio there to share news. We're heading that way now. If you want to know what's happening, that's where to learn." He held her eyes for a long second. If anyone had put a glass dish over us in that moment, we would have steamed it up with breath and tension. Then he nodded. "Maybe I'll see you there." "Maybe you will," Erin said. We left. He didn't follow. That night, I told Erin that I had considered the angles, the way he stood, the way his right foot drew back a little like he was ready to step forward, how the name on his shirt didn't quite line up with the dirt on his collar. Erin said, "You did fine. Some people walk up to the line because they want to see who you are on the other side of it. Some walk up because they intend to step over. Either way, we don't invite anyone to choose violence." "I wish we could solve everything with canned goods," I said. "We solve most things with presence and timing," she said, "and canned goods help." Weeks passed like that. Careful miles, quiet stops, choices that made sense at noon and kept making sense at midnight. We learned the signs of the infected in small towns before we saw them. Doors left half open and then carefully closed again from the inside, the way the air held a silence that wasn't total. We learned that some congregated in parking lots at shopping centres, drawn perhaps to the soft hum of refrigerated cases that still ran on misconfigured generators, then drifted away when the hum stopped. We learned that some paused at the edges of playgrounds, as if the shape of swings moved something deep and unreachable. We didn't study them up close. We didn't test theories the way some people did, because testing required proximity, and proximity required luck, and we had promised each other not to make luck a policy. The worst physical obstacle we faced arrived 3 states later, on a morning that smelled like wet concrete and cottonwood leaves. A bridge on US 281 had collapsed in a flood earlier in the season, and then collapsed again under the weight of vehicles trying to cross anyway. The detour sign sent traffic onto a county road that had turned into a stationary sculpture garden of trucks and cars angled into ditches, noses up like the vehicles could sniff a route where none existed. To the west lay a town we wanted to bypass. Too many walls, too many places for the slow to wait behind a door. To the east, fields stitched in green and gold, with a single track through them that ended in water. Straight ahead, a row of abandoned cars across the main street of a small downtown, with dusty awnings and a soda fountain sign that looked like candy itself. Erin and I parked a 1/4 mile out, behind a line of sycamores with bark like peeling paint, and we walked the last stretch with our heads down and our eyes up. In the center of the downtown, the collapse had turned the usual grid into an obstacle course. A long bed pickup with an empty gooseneck hitch occupied the intersection like a stubborn bull. On either side, a compact import halfway up on the curb, and a minivan with the rear hatch open, carpet hanging out like a long tongue. There was space enough to thread a bicycle through, maybe a compact car, not a motorhome with a long wheelbase and a tendency to scrape its tail on anything that thought it deserved respect. "We could backtrack," I said, already looking at the map for a series of doglegs that would eat a day. Erin shook her head. That bridge is the pinch point for the whole county. Backing up means going where everyone else went first and got stuck. We make this work. Even if we have to move half the town? Especially if we have to move half the town quickly, she said, before we attract company. We retrieved our kit, tow straps rated for far more than we would ask of them, a heavy-duty come-along, chains with hooks, a battery-powered impact driver with a full charge, a breaker bar the size of a small hope, and a pair of bright orange wheel chocks I loved like cousins. Erin took the bolt cutters. I took the tow cable. We kept our defensive tools slung but quiet. Then we set to work. The pickup had its wheels turned sharply left. If we could straighten them, we could drag the truck backwards 5 feet and then angle it into the narrowest possible profile. The steering wheel was locked. We broke the lock the way a tow operator would, not the way a thief would, by getting under the front end and disconnecting the tie rod on one side, so the wheel on the other became like a leader. I used the impact driver with my whole upper body braced. The first bolt argued and then let go with a sound that made my teeth ring. Erin watched the corners, counting seconds between the faraway shuffles I pretended were branches in the breeze. We ran our tow strap from the rear of the motorhome to the pickup's frame, set the line slack, chocked our own front wheels, and used the come-along to take up the slack until everything gave a little sigh. I eased forward in neutral. Erin walked beside the strap watching for a twitch in the wrong place, and we moved the pickup back exactly 5 feet. We breathed. Then we angled the front end into the narrow slice between the minivan and the storefront and hauled again. In another life, I'd moved a sofa up a narrow stairwell. The feeling was the same. Geometry arguing with gravity. Time arguing with your patience. The minivan's rear hatch wouldn't close because luggage had been halfway inside when the family that fled realized the longer path mattered more than a zipped suitcase. We slid the suitcase in and closed the hatch. At the last second, Erin lifted it again. She reached into the side pocket and pulled out a laminated sheet. On it, a list of allergies and emergency contacts written in careful handwriting by someone who had done everything right until the day the world asked for wrong. Erin folded the sheet and slid it under the wiper blade. In case they come back, she said softly. We created a channel of inches. I took the wheel of the motorhome. Erin walked ahead with her palm out and her fingers dancing the signals that meant left 3 inches, straight, right 2. We folded the mirrors in and held our breath 3 points so tight I could hear the paint whisper to brick. A figure turned the corner 2 blocks away, quiet, steady, eyes not looking at us until they were. Erin lifted her hand and spread her fingers wide. The sign we used that meant I know, but keep going. I did, for 4 agonizing minutes. We made the last turn, and I felt the rear wheels bump over a curb I didn't see, and I waited for the scrape, and it didn't come, because Erin had measured the angle with her bones and noted the height of the curb with that part of her brain that stores all the floors she has walked. We were through. We didn't drive fast. We drove away with the kind of speed that looks like serenity from a distance and like terror up close. 2 figures stepped into the street behind us and pressed their hands against the air. I watched them in the rear camera until the town bent around them and made it someone else's problem. The relief I felt when we cleared the last storefront was almost shameful. I knew we'd chosen ourselves again. Then Erin touched the side of my neck and left her hand there, and the shame melted into the thing that had kept us moving since the canyon. Love that learned to carry heavy objects without complaint. That night we parked at a county gravel pit with a view of the sky you pay for in other lives. Lightning walked along the distant horizon on legs 40 miles long. Heat lightning that didn't promise rain, just reminded us we were small under a busy atmosphere. We set our chairs beside the motorhome and listened to our small inverter hum like a satisfied insect. We ate beans and rice and added a twist of lime from the last of our fresh things. We chewed slowly. We wrote in the green notebook. We talked about the things you talk about when silence has been your companion all day. Nonsense that turns into meaning. Memory that turns into plans. Do you ever think about staying? I asked. Picking a spot and making it ours? All the time, Erin said. But staying is not the same as being safe. The road is risk, but it's also choice. In a fixed place, people can map you. The infected can find you. The wind knows you. I'm tired, I said before I knew I was going to say it. I know, she said. We sleep. Tomorrow we take a rest day in a place with water. We do laundry. We fix the cabinet hinge that's been begging you to fix it. Don't make fun of the hinge, I said. It is sincere in its needs. She laughed quietly. So am I. We found water the next day at a state fishing lake, where the spigot came up from the ground like a question mark. We filtered into our tank with the gravity system, slow and patient, and we used the pond only to rinse shoes because we never mixed wild water into our house systems unless we had to. We took our laundry to a picnic table and washed it in a plastic tub with a washboard that had seen more years of stories than we had. We strung a line between the motorhome and a cottonwood and let the wind and sun do their choreography. 2 people in a kayak paddled past and lifted a hand in greeting, and I lifted mine back, and we all pretended we were on vacation for 3 seconds. In the afternoon, a convoy rolled in. 3 vehicles full of people and things that used to be in closets. They set up near the boat ramp and immediately started a generator the size of a suitcase. It buzzed with that particular tone that breaks the shape of a quiet valley. Erin and I didn't move. We don't control other people's choices. We only control how long we share space with them. 15 minutes later, 2 infected appeared at the edge of the parking lot, walking toward the sound like iron filings toward a magnet. Erin stood and picked a path to a hill where she could watch without being a part of anything. I stayed at the motorhome, ready to move if she signaled. The group noticed only when the figures were close enough to cast long shadows on their coolers. Panic bloomed and then scattered like dandelion seed. One of the convoy leaders moved with purpose. He had done this before, but he allowed 3 people to run and 2 to freeze before he made a sound. The infected never moved, faster than steady. The leader raised a handheld light even in daylight and shone it deliberately into the eyes of one of the figures. The figure turned its head halfway, then back. He nodded once, lowered the light, and took his people by the shoulders and moved them behind a truck. They shut off the generator. Without sound, the infected slowed as if their internal compass had lost north. The group waited without moving. 10 minutes later, the figures turned away, as if someone had whispered this way in a language without words. Erin returned and sat beside me. "You okay?" I asked. "I'm okay," she said. "They learned something that will keep them alive." "What did you learn?" "That no one teaches silence until the day it saves them." We stayed one more night because the place had a way of holding us like a palm holds a pebble. In the morning, we left a small bag for the convoy, a roll of duct tape, a handful of alkaline batteries, 2 door hinges and screws in a zip-top bag, and a note that read, "Quiet saves. Light low. Face away from sound." We signed it with a little drawing of a road, a line with 2 dashes across it. Nothing like a name, but a symbol we could recognize if we saw it on a water tower one day. I liked the idea that our home could be a rumor. We made our way north and then east and then north again in arcs that followed weather and rumor and the way the map curled at the edges. We avoided cities the way you avoid conversations you know will end with everyone angry. We visited towns that still had a librarian, because librarians go to work even when the lights go off. In one town, the library had moved into the fire station because the kids knew where the fire station was. They had a charging station powered by a bicycle generator. The high school shop class built from a salvaged alternator. We pedaled for 10 minutes each and added a thin notch to a battery that let a boy hear his grandmother's voice on a recorder one more time. I don't believe in destiny, but I believe in pedaling. At the edge of a wide river that divided one kind of open space from another, we found a community that had convinced their bridge to hold. They had reduced traffic to 1 lane with Jersey barriers and a logbook on a folding table. You wrote your names and your destination and the purpose of your crossing, and it felt ceremonial without feeling like control. They had posted signs a mile out that read "No horns," "Cross at 10 miles per hour," "Lights low," "No stopping on bridge." The infected are drawn to noise, and the river's shape amplified engine notes into the kind of song you don't want to sing. The crossing felt like a rite. People watched from both sides, not suspicious, but attentive, like the crowd at a marathon startup line. When we reached the far end, 2 volunteers waved us through with the kind of relief that comes when you succeed at something delicate and no one drops a cup. We parked that night in a farm equipment lot under a sign that showed a smiling tractor. The moon was a quarter and looked like it had been cleaned for company. Erin sat with the green notebook and wrote long and slow. "What are you putting down?" I asked. "Patterns. What survivors do who stay that way. They share information without asking for allegiance. They build rules that don't require a meeting at midnight to enforce. They keep the volume down. They don't hoard, but they don't claim a virtue in having empty shelves either. They look you in the eye when they pass you in a doorway." "What about us?" I said. "What do we do?" "We move," she said, like a blessing. "We help when we can without requiring anything in return. We teach quiet by example. We make sure our house runs." House. The word did something to my chest. Our motorhome had become an organism as much as a machine. I could feel the water slosh in the fresh tank when we took a ramp too fast. I could hear the pitch of the inverter change when the fridge cycled. I could tell by the smell of the underbay whether we needed to tighten the fuel filter or just patient while the diesel cooled. Erin knew the way the cabinets clicked when closed and which one would open if I forgot to level by 2 degrees. We had made something that moved with us and kept us moving. Months in, we became a roomer ourselves. We learned this at a feed store in South Dakota. We had stopped to ask about water and to see if the supply of salt licks meant the area had livestock again. The owner, a woman with arms like a person who knows hay bales by weight in both hands, said, "You're the couple in the bus with the quiet rules." Someone left a drawing like a road on our bulletin board with a note. "They'll trade water filters for good maps." "We will," I said, smiling despite myself. "I've got a county atlas that's better than the state version," she said. "Updates written in pencil by a surveyor. Roads that never made it onto any map because they lead to one ranch and a mailbox." "We have ceramic filter elements," Erin said, "stored dry." The trade happened like a ritual. She took the filters with the care you reserve for things that keep people well. We took the atlas with the respect you give to a tool someone loved before you did. When we left, she stepped onto the porch and said, "Keep moving, you two. You're making motion look like hope." Hope is a funny thing to carry. It's light enough to float away if you don't hold it with both hands. It's heavy enough to tire you out if you keep it all for yourself. We tried to let some of it leak into the places we passed. The last big test of our roadcraft came near the Canadian border, where prairie becomes a sky so broad it makes even a motorhome feel like a pocket knife. The road had been under construction the week the world went sideways, and the equipment sat exactly where it had been parked: a grader, a paver, a row of cones in the shape of a left turn that would never happen. Midday heat pushed sound flat. You could hear a grasshopper 3 sites over. We expected quiet and got it until we didn't. A sound like distant applause grew from the east. It was the wind across a field of wheat, but there was a rhythm to it I didn't like, a beat that didn't match the breeze. Erin climbed onto the first step and looked through our small periscope mirror at a low angle. She lifted her hand and spread her fingers, not the "I know, but keep going" signal, but the one we used for attention now. I stepped outside and squinted along the shimmer of heat. A group came into view along the gravel service road parallel to ours. They were not moving like the infected. They were moving like a unit that had practiced. Dust rose behind them in a disciplined way. They were people. They were armed. They had the look of a group that believed in collecting information, supplies, maybe people. "We can go west," I said. 2 miles. then north on that farm lane in the Atlas. Or we can go through the construction and take the unfinished road while they decide where they want to be, Erin said. It's higher ground. We'll be exposed, but we'll have sightlines. I nodded. We need speed without noise. And ground clearance, she said, eyeing the paver like a cautious cat eyes a bathtub. We moved. I did the amateur rally thing I always do. Walked the path first, counted the rocks that could ruin our day, measured the slope with the bottom of my feet. Erin spotted the one place the gravel shelf could cut our rear overhang. We built a small ramp out of broken asphalt, and one clever section of fence rail I could return to its place later. Then I drove like a person who had made the road and wanted to keep it that way. Slow, precise. A finger on the dash to feel the engine under my own bones. The motorhome rose onto the unfinished lane and settled. Our engine note changed to something more open, like a singer stepping onto a stage. I kept the speed at 8 miles per hour. Faster would have drawn eyes. Slower would have given people time to make decisions we didn't want them to make. The group to the east noticed movement, but not us. They were facing another vehicle that had gotten itself into a conversation with a ditch. We passed like a thought you almost remember. At the far end of the construction, the temporary lane dove back to the main road. We took it gently. When we were down, I exhaled a breath I realized I'd been holding since Texas. Erin squeezed my hand without looking at me. We didn't say anything because people and engines both perform better without commentary. We ended that day at a wayside park with a single cottonwood and a trash barrel that someone had emptied recently, which meant there was some method at work in the county. We shut down early and let the solar finish the charging. Erin made rice with the last of the chicken broth cubes. I installed the new hinge on the cabinet we'd been joking about. The small, solid click of the door closing felt like a promise you can keep. I want to stay, I said when the sun was a hand's width above the horizon. For a day, Erin agreed. We're tired. The road will still be here in the morning. We slept with the windows open and the fans on low. Coyotes called and then quit on their own without anyone telling them to. A truck passed at 2 in the morning and didn't slow. I dreamed of bridges that held and of small drawings on bulletin boards that led to water. When people started telling stories about us, because that's what happens when motion intersects with memory, they said we had a moving fortress. They were wrong about the fortress part. Fortresses don't move. What we had was a home that knew when to arrive and when to depart. We had a house that used to call itself a vehicle and now called itself a choice. We were no one's saviors. We were two people who understood engines and nursing and the way to step aside without giving ground. We did not change the world. We changed our days until they fit the world that existed. We left behind good hinges and notes that said quiet saves and water filters we knew worked. We listened more than we spoke. We kept receipts in the form of miles. On an afternoon when the wind turned and carried the smell of rain from a storm that would miss us by 20 miles, we passed a water tower with a small drawing on it, 2 short lines across a straight one. Below it, in a hand, I recognized as the woman from the feed store a message: "Keep rolling, you show what's possible." We waved at the tower like it could wave back. Erin wrote, "Day 137, fuel 62%, fresh 54, grey 31, black 22, quiet keeps us, no horns on bridges, lights low, we move when it's on our terms." She closed the notebook and set it on the dash, where the sun could warm it. I kept my hands at 10 and 2 like the first instructor who ever checked my turns would have wanted. There are moments when the country feels like a song everyone knows and has forgotten the words to. That day, it hummed along anyway. Fields stretched on both sides like open palms. The road in front of us shone a little, heat making a mirage of shine, and then it didn't. A hawk lifted from a pole, and for 3 beats it was a shape that didn't belong to anything but air. We drove into the part of the map with fewer names, not to escape, but to remain. We didn't promise each other anything except that we would keep choosing. The world had fallen and still offered sunsets you could drink. The infected walked roads and parking lots, like sleepwalkers in a museum. People set up logbooks for bridges and bicycle generators for libraries. You can call that collapse. I called it the stubbornness of living. At the edge of a county line where someone had painted the sign with a kind of optimism that didn't match the moment, we pulled into a way station and took the far lane. We shut down, let the quiet come back as if it had been waiting for us, and listened. In the distance, the night carried on with its usual curriculum. A train, a dog, the low hum of insects. In the foreground, our home ticked and settled and cooled. Erin leaned her shoulder against mine. "Tomorrow," she said. "Tomorrow," I said, which is another way of saying yes to everything that still works. We slept. We moved in the morning. We found work to do and did it. We made breakfast and shared coffee with a couple who had walked the wrong way on a map and wanted to turn around. We drew the little road sign on their paper and showed them a cut-through a surveyor had marked years ago and no one had erased. We pointed at the water tower and told them what the symbol meant. We didn't tell them about us. We didn't have to. The road carries rumours faster than radios when radios go quiet. And if anyone later told the story and said our motorhome was a legend, I would correct them only in my head. Not a legend. A lesson. A vehicle that proved you could be gentle and firm at the same time. A little house that took corners and never apologised for being exactly the size it needed to be. On our dash, taped next to the battery monitor, I checked like a habit I enjoyed. We kept a torn corner of a map with a single sentence written in block letters. Never park where you can't leave pulling forward. Under it, in Erin's script, a second line. Never leave without leaving something better than you found it. The road forgave us for the times we couldn't manage that second line. The people who met us sometimes forgave us too. The infected didn't care one way or the other, and that was fine with me. Not everyone has to have an opinion about your day. We became what we had always been, finally, with fewer apologies. Two people who could keep a small home running under big sky. Two people who knew how to set the parking brake just right, how to bleed an injector, how to talk quietly across distance and let the words land without noise. Two people who used turning indicators even when the only other drivers were cows. When we reached another bridge months later, this one over a river that actually wanted to be crossed, we saw a sign in the same neat hand: no horns, cross at 10 miles per hour, lights low, no stopping on bridge, quiet saves. We smiled at each other. We did what the sign said because we had done it before anyone told us to. On the other side, a kid on a bicycle waved at us like we were a parade. Erin waved back. I honked the smallest honk I could, a whisper of a note. The kid laughed. The sound was the kind that breaks a tension you didn't know you held. And then we were through, and the road opened, and the sky did that thing where it looks like permission. We didn't know where we would sleep that night. We didn't need to know. We would find a place with at least 2 exits and a wind that agreed to mind its manners. We would heat beans and rice, and maybe we would add a dash of hot sauce if we had replenished in a place where a tired clerk had said, "Take what you need," and meant it. We would plan the next day the way you plan when planning is a kindness, not a compulsion. We would fix a hinge for someone. We would leave a filter and a note that said "Quiet saves" under a water tower. We would draw a small road on a bulletin board and let other people believe in rumours that are really instructions. The world will be rebuilt by people who can back a trailer into a space that looks impossible. By people who can keep diesel clean in bad weather. By people who can keep their heart rate steady when a generator refuses to start and the night needs darkness. The world will be rebuilt by librarians on bicycles and farmers who still know the names of all their wrenches and kids who wave at motorhomes like they're flags. We were 2 of those people, not the best, not the first, but present and stubborn and in love in a way that matters when the bridge is out and someone needs to move a truck 5 feet without waking every sleeping danger on Main Street. Call us nomads if you want. The broken highways had always been our home, and home, we learned, is not a place you defend with walls. It's a thing you carry, a set of rules you keep even when no one is watching, a way of running your lights at night so someone in the distance can guess you are the kind of people who will help them, if help can be given without making a mess. We put one more line under Erin's script on the torn map. If you can move, you're not cornered. We taped it beside the battery monitor. We checked the numbers. We checked each other. We eased onto the next road and made a little noise, just enough to tell the world, we're here, we're careful, we're going somewhere, and we plan to arrive. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like and subscribe. Your support keeps these creepypastas coming. Until next time, stay alert, stay safe, and never ignore the feeling that something is watching.